Hello, it's Blue Orange 22. Today I want to talk about this article here um, from South Korea. And I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. South Korea's young men are fighting against feminism. And I think what this shows is just how common the men's rights movement is around the world and the kind of sentiment around the men's rights movement. And I've said before that the men's rights movement is not about being against feminism, and that's not really the point. But it's kind of happening that way in a lot of places because there are problems that happen when you have feminist organizations or feminists in government not taking the men's rights movement seriously or not taking men's issues seriously. You're kind of putting young men in a position where they kind of have to organize on their own. And what's happening in South Korea is a little bit troubling because it's becoming a very big social problem and it's becoming a very big social divide. And so I just want to kind of break down a few points in this article. I put the link down in the description below. I recommend kind of reading it and paying attention to some of the stats and some of the figures that you'll see. So this is from the article. A Real Meter poll last year of more than 1,000 adults found that 76% of men in their 20s and 66% of men in their 30s oppose feminism, while nearly 60% of respondents in their 20s think that gender issues are the most serious source of conflict in the country. Now, those statistics are pretty startling. I mean, 76% of men in their 20s, it's 3 out of 4, and then 66% of men in their 30s, which is 2 out of 3. So more than 2 out of 3 of men under 40 in South Korea oppose feminism. And 60% of them are saying that gender issues is the biggest social issue in the country, which shows you that this is not just some kind of like fringe idea. This is not some like extremist group. This is the majority. This is actually a pretty clear majority of people saying that. And if you know about South Korea, what some of the laws are, the men in South Korea do have very legitimate points. So let's look at the article. One of the biggest points is conscription, and that's something that I'm going to cover in this channel. What angers the second paragraph, what angers Park and Kim most of all is the nation's policy of compulsory conscription, which forces men their age to serve in the military. At the same time, they think women are getting a leg up from new government programs that help them enter traditionally male-dominated industries. Ma's study of 3,000 adult men found that 72% of men aged in their 20s think that the male-only draft is a form of gender discrimination, and almost 65% believe that women should also be conscripted. Almost 83% believe that military service is better to be dodged if possible, and 68% believe it is a waste of time. They're not just concerned about losing 2 years of freedom. They're also worried about missing out on opportunities. If I can't use that time for self-improvement, won't I lag behind women in the job market? Now, job market. So in South Korea, men have to join the military for 2 years. It's the law. It's mandatory. They have to spend 2 years in the military, which first of all, that in and of itself is a huge discrimination. You're losing 2 years of your youth that you have to spend in the military. I mean, imagine if all young women had to do community service for a year and young men didn't. That would be seen as a huge discrimination. You're forcing women to do this thing for a year that young men don't have to do. But this is something that men have to do for 2 years that women don't have to do. And their point was those 2 years could be spent going to university, getting an education, getting a job, saving money, trying to build a career. It's 2 years that men in Korea lose. And if you look at the numbers, it was a significant number of men who are angry about this. 83% believe it's better to dodge it if possible, which kind of goes to show that this is a very common attitude. Let's look at something else from the article. This kind of ties into what they said about university. Um, Park points to women's universities as another example. In South Korea, there are more than a dozen women-only universities and no male equivalent. Some of these schools offer courses in highly coveted professions like law or pharmacy. And as the country caps the number of law students, the more places that go to women, the fewer there are for men. So what that means is there's a limit to the number of students who are allowed to study law in university in South Korea. But if there are more law schools for women, then mathematically it's impossible for men to have an equal amount of opportunities to attend law school. It's mathematically impossible for men to have an equal number of spaces available in law school. So basically, it's a mathematical guarantee that they're going to be disadvantaged and they're going to fall behind. And already, not only are there less university places available for men, but those men already have to spend 2 years in the military. So you can see a young man in South Korea might definitely feel disadvantaged, and they feel like no one is listening to them. They feel like every time they try and talk about it, and this is true anywhere in the world, anytime someone tries to talk about men's rights or calls themselves an MRA, they're immediately attacked. You know, they said, "Oh, you're a misogynist. Oh, you're alt-right, or you're a fascist, or you're this, or you're that." So, how do you expect young men to react? And when people say, "Well, how come MRAs are anti-feminist?" Well, if they're always attacked and criticized by feminists for talking about these kinds of things that affect their lives, what else do you expect them to say? If you look at the issues they're talking about, they're not against women's rights. They're not trying to fight against women's rights. They're saying, listen, we're forced to go to the military, and we have a major disadvantage in the university system. I mean, those are the statistics. And when you look at the statistics of how many young men feel this way, 66% of men in their 30s, 76% of men in their 20s. This is not some fringe idea. This is not something that, oh, it's an alt-right, conservative, fascist group on the internet. This is the majority of young men in the entire country. And this is a developed first world nation with very high standards of education. So you kind of have to wonder, what makes these attitudes so common? And is it really a good idea to just attack them or criticize them or put them down just for saying, hey, listen, this is happening to us, and we want to talk about it. We want to do something about it. So read the article and tell me what you think.